Good evening. I'd like to talk to you about Sybil Ludington, the American Revolutionary heroine, born April 5th, 1761, on the family farm in Grist Mill in Dutchess County, New York. She was the eldest of 12 children born to the Colonel Henry and Abigail Ludington. And during the time of her ride in the American Revolution, she was 16 years old. Her father had a military career that began when he was 17 years old. He had fought in both the Battle of Lake George and the French and Indian War. Governor Tryon of New York appointed Henry captain of the militia in Dutchess County, and because of his influence and experience, he was then appointed to the rank of colonel in the summer of 1776. Sybil, being the eldest of 12 children, was expected to take a prominent role in raising her siblings, along with tending to the family, farm, and business to help her mother, as many women in the American Revolution did. They had to face the tough reality that their husband and father might leave home some morning and never return. As you can see on the screen, there is a route that Sybil rode. It's compared to the ride of Paul Revere. Sybil rode 40 miles to alert the Continental Militia of the British attack on Danbury, Connecticut on April 25th, 77. As the story goes, it was a rainy evening when a exhausted messenger arrived at the farm, the Ludington farm, to tell her father that there was an attack on Danbury by the British. And Danbury at that time was an important supply depot for the Continental Army. Because most of the militia under Colonel Ludington were farmers and it was April, they were all on their own farms planting, dismissed across several counties. And so he would need to stay and muster the troops as they arrived from all their different locations. Sybil, knowing the backcountry and farmland, volunteered to ride and raise as many soldiers as possible. She did just that, and the militia marched to meet with her father and then on to meet with General Worcester's forces in Ridgefield, Connecticut. And although the militia was outnumbered by the British, they were able to drive the Brits back to the Long Island Sound. I used several resources trying to find history for Sybil. I will tell you that there were a lot of sources that talked about the indifferences and the untruths that riddled the history. There were actually 8 different spellings for her name in much of the research. There was a book, actually, they say it's Sybil's debut, the book by Martha J. Lamb, written in 1880 on the history of the city of New York, where she was mentioned. There was a book that was written by the Colonel's grandchildren by a local historian called Colonel Henry Ludington, a memoir. And then the most recent publication by Vincent d'Aquino in 2019 was a book entitled Patriot Hero of the Hudson Valley, The Life and Ride of Sybil Ludington. This was just an ordinary man who found the revolutionary sign and began to look into the history of Sybil, found that there were many untruths and undocumented sources. And so it caused him to delve a little deeper to discover the real truth. And I was thankful for that. And I think as history students and teachers and graduate students and historians, we too need to delve deeper into the truths of the American Revolutionary War. You'll see on the next slide that there have been some signs and monuments erected by the efforts of the Daughters of the American Revolution. And then also in 1940, there was a poem written by Bernard Bailey, which echoed Longfellow's Paul Revere's Ride, and it appeared in This Week magazine. And so there were 5.5 million people that read this poem that, much like Paul Revere's Ride, gave a different story than what the real truth was. So there was a postage stamp commemorated to her ride in 1975, and there was an opera sung and performed in 1993. And to this day, they still have parades, they reenact her ride, and they have a marathon that runs that same 40-mile route in that city. So just like what we heard with Paul Revere's Ride and some of the other historical tales that we hear about American Revolution, we need to look for the truth in each and every one of them. And I want to leave you with a quote from Paula Hunt, who pulled a lot of these sources together in the article she wrote that says the persistent popularity of Sybil Ludington's mythical ride suggests the value that Americans find in history. Sybil Ludington could become what Americans needed her to be, exactly what Americans were made of. And regardless of maybe the untruths or the fiction related to this, she was a hero, and that's what America needs is heroes. Thank you. Happy Resurrection Sunday.